This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Oteli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Our top diplomats from China and India hold talks on their disputed Himalayan border, building on last year's agreement on peace and de-escalation. Wild weather rages as one typhoon floods southern China and another threatens dangerous conditions in Japan and northern Taiwan. And Beijing hits back at fresh U.S. sanctions aimed at entities in the mainland and Hong Kong, saying its cooperation with Iran is lawful and should not be disrupted. Plus, Hyundai Motors management strikes a preliminary deal over pay with the union after a full-day strike on Friday. Also ahead, for some young South Koreans, moving back home is a financial strategy. No rent, more savings, but at what cost? We look at the price of putting independence on hold. China and India are taking another step towards easing years of tensions. Their top officials meeting in Beijing for the 25th round of talks on the country's long-running border dispute. India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval has met Chinese Foreign Minister Wang in Beijing. Both sides are seeking to maintain peace and stability along their disputed Himalayan frontier. Relations deteriorated sharply in 2020 after a deadly clash between Chinese and Indian troops in the Galwan Valley. Tensions have since eased following a series of military and diplomatic talks. Now, the two countries share a roughly 3,500-kilometre-long border and have accused each other in the past of trying to assert control over disputed territory. Earlier today, Mr. Doval also met with Chinese Vice President Han Zheng, discussing border peace and ways to improve bilateral ties.
此次特代会晤，双方将按照两国领导人共识精神，继续就边界问题深入沟通，共同维护边境地区的和平与安宁。双方还将就双边关系和国际地区问题交换意见。
Today's discussions come ahead of a BRICS summit in the Indian capital next month. Sources quoted by Reuters say that President Xi Jinping is likely to attend with a large delegation. If confirmed, it would mark his first visit to India in 7 years. All right, for the very latest, let's bring in CNA senior correspondent Tan Yu Guan joining us live from Shanghai. And I've got Neha Puni as well reporting for CNA from New Delhi. Well, Yu Guan, you were going to kickstart a conversation starting with you. Given the focus on keeping the border stable, what would Beijing actually like to see come out of these talks today?
Well, Oteli, first and foremost, in plain language, Beijing wants the border quiet. We see this in the language of the Foreign Ministry briefing yesterday and also in the consensus reached by the leaders from both sides earlier. In a nutshell, they want no new clashes, no slide back to 2020. But it also wants to move beyond simply putting out fires. Right now, Beijing is trying to fireproof the border, not technically solve it. Nobody expects Wang or Doval to settle the dispute today. What Beijing would like to see is practical progress. For example, keeps the troops apart, make encounters less risky, put clearer rules in place when tensions flare. And why does that matter? Because Beijing has made it clear it does not want the border to keep dragging the whole relationship backwards. Now, interestingly, these talks did not come up at all in today's Foreign Ministry briefing. The soundbite you heard there was from yesterday. On its own, I would not read too much into that, but taken together with the very restrained official coverage we have seen, nearly one-liners, Beijing certainly does not want to appear to be building expectations around some dramatic breakthrough. So the test today is not have they solved the border, it is really have they made it calmer, safer, and harder to blow up. So Beijing may not be able to remove the problem just yet, but it does want to stop that problem from setting the temperature for everything else.
So, okay, we've heard China's side. Neha, from India's perspective, what are the key things that Mr. Doval is looking to get out of these talks with China's Wang Yi?
Mr. Doval is the special representative on the boundary question from India's side, and his main remit, Otelli, is going to try and move that whole question forward. Can India and China try and bring the troop movements along that eastern frontier that blew up in 2020 back to pre-2020 levels? That's been India's main ask. China has been saying for many years now that one incident shouldn't drag the entire relationship down. But India's position has been that what happened at that border has very much defined this relationship for several years now, and it maintains that to have a relationship that is prosperous, that is one that is built on mutual trust, the border needs to be peaceful and the border needs to go back to pre-2020 levels. And to do that, it's Mr. Doval's remit to talk about, buffer zones that were set up where disengagement has happened. Now, can troops move back to pre-Galwan levels? That's number one. There's also a concern here in New Delhi about another frontier in India's eastern region of Arunachal Pradesh, which has now become a concern. That's the Arunachal Pradesh region. It's something that China claims as its own region as part of southern Tibet. It's something that New Delhi has repeatedly rejected, claiming Arunachal Pradesh as Indian territory. Something it's maintained has always been the case. We've heard reports of, recent face-offs between Chinese and Indian troops. Both sides have neither confirmed nor denied, but that has raised questions about whether or not the border is truly calm and whether or not that question of trust is one that both sides have, really been able to solve. And Mr. Doval has been, key to trying, to solve that particular question, whether it's 2017, whether there was a similar standoff with Chinese troops, whether it was 2020. And he's really the main political representative from New Delhi. So he's going to try and move that question forward to try and bring in some sort of political resolution, some movement ahead of that expected visit by the Chinese president to New Delhi next month.
Yeah, which nicely bring this next question to you, Guan. I mean, we're talking about the BRICS summit happening in just a few weeks in New Delhi. High expectations that Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to attend. But like what Neha was saying, a number of issues to be ironed out. How much of what happens here is really about creating that right environment for a Xi and Modi meeting?
Well, Tally, the timing clearly matters, but I will be careful about saying that this is simply about clearing the runway for Xi Jinping. There are signs preparations are being made for a possible visit, but Beijing still has not confirmed that he is going. At this level, preparation is not commitment. Plans can change. So a better way to picture it is this. Before you roll out the red carpet, you want to make sure there isn't a tripwire across the border. And there is one interesting clue in how Beijing is handling this. Yesterday, the Foreign Ministry was asked directly about these border talks in the context of Xi's expected visit to India. And Beijing simply did not engage with that part of the question. It talked about keeping the border peaceful, continuing discussions, and the wider relationship, but it did not link the talks to Xi's visit. So we cannot say that Beijing has made progress here a condition for Xi to travel. We simply do not know. What we do know is that neither side wants another border crisis landing right on top of a leaders' meeting. So they do not need to solve the border before Xi and Modi meet, but they do need to stop it from hijacking the summit before it even starts. Otelli?
So, okay, let's not damper our expectations. Let's damper our expectations here that, Xi and Modi might actually meet. But in the event that they do, Neha, what could India hope to get from that engagement?
When they last met in 2025, both sides have signaled that they want to move this relationship forward, which is why we're also seeing National Security Advisor Ajit Doval meeting Wang in China. And all of this harks back to 2024, Otelli, when they first set the ball rolling, when they agreed that it is time to move this relationship forward, to put the Galwan episode behind them, to try and reset this relationship. A lot of that had to do with what was happening in America, given the sort of upheaval we were seeing globally with US President Donald Trump's economic policies. India has been trying to up its engagement with its immediate neighbors, and China was number one on that list. India has, in the last 1 year, we've seen, India remove some restrictions on Chinese investments. We've seen the resumption of direct flights. We have seen both sides talk about doing more, though, trying to resume, more on the economic front, trying to make this a more robust economic relationship. And in the past, when the two leaders have met, that has been the point at which major agreements have been announced. So if presidency were to come to New Delhi for the BRICS Leaders Summit, one, that would be a big feather in New Delhi's cap. He did not come, for example, when the G20 summit was held here, that India hosted a few years ago, and that was considered a snub by many to New Delhi's chairmanship. That was, of course, at the peak of bilateral ties being sour between the two neighbors. Two, of course, it would really signal, experts say, that the two countries have successfully, put this episode behind them, and they have found a way to successfully address not just the border question, but also to put this relationship politically back to pre-2020 levels.
Right, many thanks for sharing your insights there. Neha Punia reporting for CNA from New Delhi and CNA's senior correspondent Tanya Guan in Shanghai. Well, we're going to keep the conversation going. So for more insights into the long-running border dispute, I am going to be speaking with Ivan Lidarev. He's research fellow from the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. China has firmly opposed U.S. sanctions targeting Iran and its trading partners, calling the measures illegal. Beijing warns that the move will only escalate tensions and is urging all sides to return to dialogue. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent earlier threatened damaging penalties on those that refuse to cut economic links with Tehran, saying that no one is above the reach of U.S. sanctions. Well, the measures are intended to choke Iran's ability to obtain funds for its nuclear weapons program by targeting 5 key sectors: digital assets, technology, gold, aviation, and shipping. Tehran has vowed to retaliate. The U.S. Treasury said that it has already imposed sanctions on some 60 entities, individuals, and vessels, including firms based in mainland China and Hong Kong. The Chinese Foreign Ministry says that Beijing would do what it takes to protect its interests.
中国同伊朗的合作始终在国际法的框架内进行，不应受到干扰破坏。中方正密切关注相关的动向，将采取一切必要措施，坚定维护自身权益。
The latest economic pressure comes after military strikes and diplomatic efforts failed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz or end the 6-month conflict. China is Iran's biggest oil customer, putting Beijing at the center of Washington's efforts to tighten the economic squeeze on Tehran. Well, earlier we spoke with Omar Rahman, who's a fellow at the Middle East Council on Global Affairs, on how these sanctions will impact Iran's trade partners.
It may be a threat. Now, it has initiated secondary or expanded secondary sanctions against a number of firms. But it has also given, a time frame for countries and companies and banks and so on to comply with this. So that interim may just be a threat, but we'll see if it has the capacity to go in there and do it. I do believe that it intends to do so, but it's not going to be without consequence. First of all, the biggest trading partner of Iran is China. Now, do you want to go into economic warfare with China by sanctioning Chinese banks? China has the assets, the weaponry to hit back at the United States. So that's something that the United States needs to consider very carefully when it pursues that. But there are other countries. Turkey is a major trading partner. The EU is a trading partner of Iran. And so the U.S. has a lot of work ahead. It's also how effective is this going to ultimately be against Iran? Iran is the most sanctioned country in the world and has been for a very long time. Now, this is not, because there's not that much room there, this is not aimed directly at Iran, but again, on expanding secondary sanctions, so on those who do business with Iran in order to, as the secretary said, asphyxiate Iran, cut off its lungs from its economy and allow it to breathe. But Iran, again, has been under sanctions for a very long time. And so it's used to operating under those conditions, and it has ways of getting around them.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, fast fashion retailer Shein's IPO order book is already filled, well ahead of its trading debut next Tuesday. Plus, Japan's government mulls a tax break to nudge companies towards divesting non-core businesses. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. You are just in time for business news with Roland Lim. Roland, seems like it's been an active time for labor movements in South Korea. What's the latest?
Yeah, you heard right. A tentative deal at Hyundai Motor, a rejected agreement at SK Hynix, and division at the ranks at Samsung Electronics. Let's start with South Korea's largest automaker. A tentative wage deal struck between Hyundai management and union officials. It follows a strike last Friday involving around 40,000 workers. That's the first full-day strike in a decade. Under the tentative agreement, workers would receive a 100,000 won increase in their basic monthly salary, about $72, along with a bonus equivalent to 4 months' salary. Hyundai has also agreed to raise the retirement age once the South Korean government passes legislation, increasing it nationwide from 60 to 65. Union members will vote on the deal on August 31st. Hyundai workers have staged 60 hours of strikes this year with estimated losses of around $1.6 billion. The automaker recently posted record second quarter revenue, although operating profit fell nearly 21% from a year earlier. South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix's union has reportedly rejected a tentative wage agreement. About half of the union members voted against the agreement, with the margin said to be very narrow. The world's second largest memory chipmaker has been turning in strong profit from its high bandwidth memory, or HBM chips, and reached a tentative deal last week, but this was subject to a vote. The agreement included a 6.3% wage increase and a revision to the profit-sharing bonus scheme, in which 40% of bonuses would be paid in cash, 60% in company shares. The management's proposal this year to pay more than half of its bonuses in shares has been met with opposition, as some employees are concerned about the volatility of SK Hynix shares. The stock had hit a record high in June on enthusiasm over the AI boom before sliding on fears that too much money is being spent with insufficient reward. The South Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics is reportedly facing growing internal pressure over a widening compensation gap between its two biggest divisions, chips and smartphone. Now, this follows larger profit gaps between the two businesses. The company's Device Solutions division, which handles semiconductors, posted around $64 billion in operating profit for the April to June period. The Device Experience division, which handles smartphones and home appliances, however, recorded its first quarterly loss of around $574 million. Back in May, a wage agreement was reached to allocate 10.5% of the company's semiconductor operating profit as special bonuses to chip workers. The deal averted an 18-day strike as union workers demanded better pay structures. It, however, meant smaller bonuses for employees in other divisions. Samsung chairman Lee Jae-yong, in response to the situation, said all union members and Samsung employees are one family. Fast fashion giant Shein has already filled up its IPO offer book just a day after it opened subscriptions. moving it closer to its long-awaited debut on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. It's aiming to raise $1.8 billion. Reports say investors' orders came from several existing shareholders as well as China-focused and multi-strategy funds. A filing show the company has secured existing shareholders such as Tiger Global and General Atlantic to purchase $383 million worth of shares. The company launched its new share sale this week, bringing its valuation to $27 billion. It is, however, around 70% lower than its nearly $100 billion private market valuation back in 2022. Now, company filings indicate a planned sale of 280 million shares. Now, each share priced between 47.60 and 49.50 Hong Kong dollars. Final share price will be revealed on the 31st of August, with the stock expected to start trading on the 1st of September. Singapore and Guangdong are deepening ties in areas like digital economy, healthcare, and biomedicine. 22 new deals had been inked at the latest meeting of the Collaboration Council. They ranged from AI-powered road safety solutions to bringing maternal health technologies to global markets. Council co-chair Ong Yi Kun says that these deals are reasons for optimism even as the global environment shifts.
ASEAN, with its growing market and geopolitical centrality, is an ideal space to bring China's products and services to the world. Just as Singapore was a reference point in the past for China's reform and opening up, today we can be the catalyst, gateway, and facilitator to the globalization of China's products and services.
So under such partnerships, Singapore offers a strong test bed and rich application scenarios in an urban setting, while Guangdong companies gain international track record that can open doors beyond China.
Japan is reportedly considering tax incentives for companies selling non-core businesses in the hope that the firms will redirect the money into growth or mergers and acquisitions. Reuters reports that the tax break would defer the roughly 30% corporate tax on gains from selling businesses as long as companies reinvest the proceeds in acquisitions and their core operations. The aim is to shift capital out of underperforming businesses and into stronger growth areas.
So it sounds like this is Japan's reform program that's somewhat moving into its next phase. Roland, tell us more about, essentially, is this really a story about breaking up these conglomerates to sell businesses that they don't actually need? Yeah, essentially, I mean, Tokyo actually wants it to be less painful for Japanese conglomerates to slim down. I mean, right now, if a company decides to sell its non-core assets, it's facing corporate taxes of up to 30%. So there's very little incentive there. Under the new proposal, as I've just mentioned, I mean, that tax can be deferred indefinitely as long as within several years you use that money and you acquire a company or a business that will actually generate more core profits for you. So the message is very clear. I mean, slim down your business if you're not competitive, put that money into businesses that you are competitive in. So I'm sure there are, plenty of options out there, but why does the government think that this tax incentive is necessary? Right, yeah, because Japan has a capital allocation problem. I mean, a recent Japanese government study by Reuters, cited by Reuters, actually suggests that around 65% of invested corporate capital sitting in businesses actually do not generate any income or any earnings for their cost of capital. And historically, that's because Japan's conglomerates have always been of the mindset that they don't want to lay off jobs, they want to be big and stable, but all that, of course, has changed. So Tokyo wants to break that cycle. It's the idea that's partly modeled by Germany's early 2000s, when they also were trying to unravel corporate shareholding structures. So, I mean, some experts say that this could be possibly even a game changer for Japan. But what are your thoughts on this? How does this all fit into the broader overhaul of corporate Japan? Well, Japan has been trying to push for this for a very long time, more than 10 years now. What came
to a head was back in 2023. The Tokyo Stock Exchange actually told companies, listed companies explicitly that they should manage their cost capital and improve their share price. And then we fast forward to this year, regulators went even further because of the Corporate Governance Code 2026. That actually puts greater emphasis on how companies should allocate capital and invest that growth. So Japanese conglomerates are pretty lax. I mean, they are sitting on something like $1.6 trillion worth of cash that they're not investing in. So the pressure is on them, and regulators are also on their backs to actually either invest it productively, use it for acquisitions, or return it to shareholders.
1.6 trillion, you say? I mean, that sounds like quite a chunk. So, I mean, from what you're seeing, I mean, is it already changing the M&A market? Well, the animal spirits have sort of stirred. I mean, last year, deals involving companies more than doubled to $353 billion. That's according to the London Stock Exchange Group. Divestitures also accounted for quite a big chunk of that, about $45 billion. So we are seeing more companies being taken private. We are seeing more private equity deals being done, and also more pressure from activist investors. So I would say that, yes, it is creating that market or space for more asset sales. All right, great insights as usual, but I will leave things as that for now because we have to go for a short break. But we'll see you later for Business Update. Roland? Well, coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China and India back at the negotiating table over their disputed border. But can progress on the frontier more broadly translate into better ties? Well, an expert joins us to unpack what today's talks could mean for relations between the two Asian powers. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. China calls U.S. sanctions targeting Iran and its trading partners illegal, as Washington threatens penalties on those that do not cut economic links with Tehran. Beijing warns it will only escalate tensions. As southern China grapples with intensified flooding as Tropical Storm Narra dumps heavy rain in the region. Nearby provinces Hainan and Guangdong are bracing for impact as it tracks east. Plus, China and India take another step towards easing years of tensions on their long-running border dispute. Top officials meeting in Beijing today for their 25th round of talks. Now, relations plunged in 2020, if you recall, following a deadly clash in the Galwan Valley. But tensions have eased in recent times, following a series of military and diplomatic talks. And for more insights into this, we're joined now by Ivan Lidarev, a research fellow from the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. Well, thanks, Ivan, for joining us this evening. Firstly, let's just start with a bigger picture question. Because you wrote recently that the thaw in China-Indian relations is actually yielding results. But how far have they come, since that 2020 Valley clash? And at this moment, just how fragile is the progress that we are seeing now?
I think that progress has been substantial because if you look in terms of bilateral visits, diplomatic engagement, relaxation of investment rules, there are many dimensions in which things have clearly improved. And most importantly, the border has been stabilized. So there is clearly substantial progress, but of course, a thaw is not does not mean a reset. So they haven't resolved any of the fundamental issues that obstruct the further development of their relationship. So there is fragility, but I think that both sides looked into the abyss in 2020 and decided they don't want to go there. So I think that's why things will keep on improving at least for some time.
Okay, so progress is substantial, but not quite a reset. You've actually highlighted an interesting dilemma for India, that you said more trade could help stabilize the border, but New Delhi wants a more stable border before opening up much further. So, I mean, what does Beijing need to do to, give India, or rather to unlock deeper economic ties with India?
Well, I think that is very important here to distinguish between border trade and the overall economic relationship between the two sides. I think that greater border security might increase also border trade from Indian perspective. But India is also reacting very much to its own vulnerabilities on the border. So there are limitations to what China can do. But in terms of concrete measures, I think that China can, for example, slow down or stop the development of its border infrastructure and the development of border villages. I think that this is very sensitive from Indian perspective. If we speak about the overall trade relationship, then general de-escalation of tensions on the border and stabilization of the border and kind of downgrading of the whole territorial dispute would be very good for the economic relation, especially for the investment relationship, not necessarily so much for trade.
So if let's look at what could open up if they do make progress, if the border situation improves. How far do you think this economic relationship could realistically go, and where would India, still draw that red line?
Well, I think that there is substantial potential for the economic relationship because I think that both sides realize that they need each other. China needs India as a huge and fast developing market, and India needs China for technology and for investment. So, of course, the territorial dispute and the situation on the border imposes limits. But this plays a role primarily when there is a crisis. When there is a crisis, clearly things slow down. One also has to understand that there is a difference between the trade and the investment side of the relationship. For example, the 2020 border crisis did not derail the trade relationship. Actually, it kept on growing, and now China is once again India's largest trading partner. But the investment relationship suffered very severely. And I think this comes down to bigger issues such as economic security, India's reasonable fears of potential supply chain dependencies on China, and the fact that China might weaponize these dependencies against India. So there are substantial obstacles in this respect, but also the potential is very big. And I think that in the last 5-6 years, both sides realize that they need to improve their economic relationships.
So we see obstacles, but we see potential as well. So, I mean, the key question, the big thing is, Xi Jinping, he could be in New Delhi for the BRICS summit next month, which will be potentially his first in 7 years. So, firstly, how optimistic are you of that happening? And we know what would Mr. Doval and Wang need to deliver on the border today for that, for Xi and Modi to have more substance to build on when they next meet?
Well, I'm more on the optimistic side. I think that the visit is more likely to happen than not, because I think that China has decided that it needs to improve relations with India. I think that that's a fundamental decision, and I think this is also to some extent a return favor to Prime Minister Modi's visit to China last August when he took part in the SCO summit in Tianjin. So I'm actually optimistic in this respect. What Doval and Wang need to deliver, I don't think that they need to deliver anything in particular. What is important for this meeting is already delivered, namely relative stability on the border. That's the most important thing. Of course, if they manage to advance the talks on progress on the border, early harvest agreement on less contentious parts of the border, I think that this will give good momentum to the meeting. But I don't think that this is necessarily a prerequisite. Also, I think that President Xi will very much like to be in Delhi, to be seen very much as a great leader of of BRICS at this moment when clearly BRICS is a little bit in a crisis because of the US-Iran war. And this in itself puts India in a very difficult position. So one can interpret his visit both as a way to help India, but also as a way to kind of emerge as BRICS' leader.
So, but I mean, Ivan, we have been here before in the sense that, how we've seen China and India relations improve, and then only for another border confrontation to just send them back a few steps. So, what could derail, this thaw again? And what do we need to be convinced that this time it's different?
Well, I think that one has to distinguish between derailing the thaw and derailing the China-India relationship. I think that a lot of things can derail the thaw. For example, tensions related to Tibet for example, the potential, the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama. One can imagine another border crisis or some crisis involving Pakistan or kind of greater Indian participation in a revitalized Quad. So there are many options for delaying the toll. But the whole thing is that China-India relations are characterized by a lot of tensions, followed by frozen relations and then tolls. So what would break this cycle and derail the whole relationship? I think it has to be something very big, something like a real military conflict, something much closer to 1962 than to 2020, or potentially the alignment of India to the United States, which is a very sensitive thing to China, or alternatively, a fundamental rethinking of the US-China competition, practically the conclusion of the US-China competition, which would put China-India relations in a completely different light. But I think this is very unlikely.
All right. Well, thanks very much for your insights. As always, Ivan Lidarev, specialist in China-India relations from the National University of Singapore. And we've got more coverage on our platform, CNA.Asia, and on our mobile app as well. Check this out. This commentary on whether a map war is brewing between India and China amid a naming of sites by both parties in a disputed border region. Parts of southern China are grappling with intensified flooding brought on by tropical storm Narra. The weather system has lingered over the waters near China's Guangxi for days now, dumping heavy rain in the region and forcing the evacuation of some 54,000 people. In Guangxi's Chongzuo city, authorities had to evacuate more than 15,000 after water levels exceeded a record that was set in 2008. Water from overflowing rivers reached the city, with the levels reaching rooftops of low-rise buildings and even power lines. Now, Beijing has allocated some $7 million for recovery work in Guangxi. The rains are expected to persist through Wednesday as the storm slowly drifts eastwards towards the provinces of Hainan and Guangdong and weakening as it moves further inland. The storm also inundated parts of Vietnam's north in the past days. But its Met agency says that rain across flood-hit regions has significantly eased, and along with it, the gradual receding of floodwaters. Officials, however, say that some areas remain at risk of flooding as river levels remain high. One person has died and several thousands displaced by days of persistent rainfall. Meantime, Typhoon Saudel is approaching Japan's southwestern prefectures, bringing destructive gusts, heavy rain and high waves. The country's weather agency warns that its winds could be strong enough to collapse some homes. And that's because the storm is packing winds of up to 165 kilometers per hour. Thousands of households across the islands of Okinawa and Amami have been ordered to evacuate. Residents are warned of the possibility of landslides, flooding and swollen rivers. Ferry services between Okinawa and Amami have also been suspended, while hundreds of flights cancelled. Saudel is expected to gradually weaken as it nears Taiwan and China. It is expected to deliver heavy rains as it passes by northern Taiwan later this week. The storm is then forecast to make landfall along China's eastern coast. China has issued an orange alert for high waves of up to 12 meters expected in parts of the East China Sea. Coming up next on East Asia Tonight, what if moving back home could help you get ahead? For some young South Koreans, giving up independence means saving more. But there is a trade-off. More after this break. Singapore and Vietnam are looking to deepen technological cooperation in areas including AI, semiconductors, and advanced manufacturing. The two countries say that this is part of a shared vision to become leading strategic tech partners in Southeast Asia, with both sides becoming more technologically resilient through cooperation and connectivity. Singapore Foreign Affairs Minister Vivian Balakrishnan and his Vietnamese counterpart, Lê Hoài Trung, made the commitment at the inaugural Singapore-Vietnam Strategic Dialogue. Both sides will explore collaborations in the data economy, biotechnology and quantum technologies. And these include co-research and co-development, linking academia and businesses from both sides. And one area of interest is the responsible and safe development and use of AI. The countries are also seeking trusted data exchanges to benefit research, with plans to facilitate dialogue between relevant agencies from both sides on cross-border data flows. Well, Singapore and Vietnam have also agreed on training programs for senior Vietnamese officials. Coordinating Minister for Public Services, Chan Chun Sing, says that strong institutions and capable governments will become more important in helping countries adapt to external shocks. And that's as both countries navigate a more uncertain geopolitical and economic environment amid growing competition from tech shifts. CNA's Sabrina Ng with this report.
The warm and long-standing relationship between Singapore and Vietnam was strengthened by generations of leaders, and it continues today. Singapore and Vietnam have elevated relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This is also the first Singapore-Vietnam strategic dialogue, which brings together senior officials and government leaders to discuss governance and public sector transformation. This dialogue was part of agreements inked during Vietnamese President Ho Lim's state visit to Singapore in May. Speaking at the dialogue, Coordinating Minister for Public Services Chan Chun Sing says the dialogue allows the exchange of views candidly on emerging challenges. Both countries are grappling with a more complex global environment as geopolitical competition intensifies and technology reshapes economies and societies. Mr. Chan says strong institutions and capable governments will become more important in helping countries adapt to these changes.
Policy consistency, regulatory effectiveness, and the quality of the public service matter for economic competitiveness. Businesses consider these factors when deciding where to invest and where to build for the long term. Governments also need the confidence and trust of their people. Public trust enables governments to build consensus, mobilize society, and undertake difficult reforms in which benefits may only be apparent many years later.
The two sides signed an agreement covering study visits and executive education programs for senior Vietnamese Communist Party officials. These programs will start next year until 2029. Vietnam's Communist Party Politburo member Chen Kum Tu says both countries should maintain regular high-level exchanges. He also called for deeper sharing of experiences in governance and leadership development.
Chúng tôi đặc biệt quan tâm và mong muốn học hỏi kinh nghiệm của Singapore trong xây dựng nền hành chính hiện đại, quản trị quốc gia hiệu quả, phương thức lãnh đạo, hoạch định và tổ chức thực hiện chính sách của Đảng, hành động nhân dân Singapore, cơ chế phát hiện, đào tạo, bồi dưỡng và trọng dụng nhân tài, xây dựng đội ngũ cán bộ lãnh đạo kế cận có tầm nhìn và năng lực đáp ứng yêu cầu phát triển trong giai đoạn mới, thúc đẩy hơn nữa giao lưu giữa lãnh đạo hai đảng.
Both sides hope the dialogue will become a regular event to develop future leaders and find practical ways to navigate emerging challenges together.
For some young South Koreans, the path to getting ahead financially now means putting independence on hold. Living with family can offer breathing room to regroup and plan for what comes next, but it may bring longer-term consequences. CNA's Money Mind looks into the economics behind this unconventional choice.
Imagine walking away from your job and ending up with more money in the bank. The secret for Ji-Son Kim was going home. No salary, more savings. That's the financial equation she says changed her life. 4 months ago, the 31-year-old quit her job in Seoul and moved back in with her father. In South Korea, people like her are known as full-time children. Instead of earning a salary, Ji-Son now runs the household. She says it's helping her save more money than when she lived alone.
사실 제가 5년 전 첫 직장에서도 세후 300만 원 조금 넘게 받았었어요. 근데 5년이 지난 지금 세후 290만 원 정도를 받았는데 그 사이에 물가가 너무 많이 오르고 월세도 너무 부담스러워서 일단 퇴사를 하게 되었고 자취를 유지하는 것보다 본가에 내려와서 지내는 게 더 효율적이라고 생각이 들어서 내려왔습니다.
Ji-son worked as a physical therapist in Seoul. Almost 70% of his salary went towards rent and living expenses. After 5 years of working, she was saving around 800,000 won a month, just under $600. But she didn't think it was enough to build her future.
제가 따로 하는 적금이나 주식 계좌를 봤을 때 제가 서울에서 지내면서 남은 금액이 이 정도밖에 안 되는 거에서 약간 현타가 왔었고
Today, Ji-son lives 2 hours from Seoul in Icheon province. She's currently receiving unemployment benefits while preparing for her next step. The payments end in November this year. Her father provides the home they share and covers most household costs. Ji-son pays for insurance, some daily expenses, and puts around 1 million won a month into savings and investments. With housing and transport costs gone, she's saving more than she did while working in Seoul.
식비도 별도로 들었었는데 아빠의 집에 지내면서 거주 환경과 식비와 교통비가 감소가 되니까 그것을 적금으로 넣을 수 있어서 오히려 서울 때보다 단돈 10만 원이라도 더 모을 수 있었어요.
Saving money doesn't mean working less. Ji-son's workday starts at the gym. Using her training as a physical therapist, she supervises her father's daily exercise routine. The rest of the day is spent cooking, cleaning, shopping, and looking after the household.
집안일은 하루에 한 6시간 정도 일을 하고 있는 것 같고요. 제일 손이 많이 가는 일은 아무래도 식사 준비예요. 메뉴 구성도 해야 하고 그 이후에는 설거지까지 해야 하니까 제일 힘든 것 같아요. 처음에는 그냥 집안일 수준이라고 생각을 했어요. 그런데 제가 아예 전업으로 집안일을 해보니까 정말 많은 시간과 노동, 그에 따른 책임이 따르는 일이라고 생각을 했습니다.
Ji-son estimates replacing everything she does would cost around 2.7 million won a month, just under $2,000. That includes household chores, caregiving, and physical therapy for her father. Her father worked for 38 years in a furniture factory before retiring. He now lives on his pension. After Ji-son's mother died, father and daughter found themselves depending on each other in a different way.
예, 제가 연금 받고 있는 거 가지고는 남을 시킬 수는 없고요. 제가 해야죠. 지선이가 도와주니까 제 할 일이 줄어져서 훨씬 편하고 좋습니다. 의존하는 게 아니라 일단은 가족이니까 같이 서로 돕고.
아무래도 얻은 것은 월세나 식비를 아낄 수 있어서 그 돈으로 제가 편하게 모을 수 있었고요. 그리고 가족과 함께하는 시간이 얻을 수 있었다고 생각을 합니다. 그동안 아빠의 일상을 잘 몰랐었는데 부족한 부분을 제가 도와드릴 수 있고 그리고 제가 잃은 것은 아무래도 사회생활의 속도감이라고 생각을 해요. 그리고 경제적인 독립도 좀 늦춰질 것 같고 주변 제 친구들과 비교해 보면 솔직히 좀 조급해질 때도 있습니다.
Well, you can catch Money Mind's full episode titled Why I Choose Housework and Moved Back Home to Become a Full-Time Child on YouTube, MeWatch, and CNA.Asia. Well, it's the penultimate day of the second edition of the World Humanoid Robot Games in Beijing. And across the competitions, the robots are showing both their advantages and their limits. In tug of war, for instance, strength is only useful if you can stay upright. The robots pull with all their might, but for two on the left, the contest is over almost as soon as it begins. And then it's into the ring. The robots strike poses, spring into position and trade blows, though some punches and kicks find nothing but air. Now, landing a hit isn't the only challenge. Keeping your balance can be just as difficult. And the robots also get a chance to show off some dance moves. Breakdancing puts coordination and rhythm to the test. Some manage to keep up with the beat. One, however, takes the idea of dance till you drop rather literally. And across the games, there have been plenty of falls, tumbles, and unexpected moments. Yet amid the mishaps are glimpses of what these machines could one day become. And that wraps up this Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.